Indie games are pretty cool. Problem is, there's way too many of them. So I thought to myself, why not compile my last 2 years of indie reviews and highlights into an easily bingeable list of 27 indie games you need to try? It's what the people want. No, it's what they deserve. Maybe hide your wallets though. So, y'all ready to get funky? Yes, I'll admit it, I'm jumping on the hype train a little bit. At first, I wasn't really sure if I had anything to say about Pizza Tower other than game good, but I'm not about to let this pizza leave the table without taking a slice for myself. I'm the indie games guy, and Pizza Tower is the kind of game that gets me excited to talk about video games. Pizza Tower is a 2D platformer with one of the most strikingly insane aesthetics I've ever seen in a video game. If most games carefully measure out a tablespoon of style sauce, Pizza Tower pours the entire fucking bowl into the mix on purpose. Like an MS Paint cartoon from the depths of hell, Pizza Tower's entire personality is fueled with adrenaline and oozing with creativity. Looking at Pizza Tower is like staring directly at the sun. It's almost painful, and yet it uses this aggressive design to loop back into something you just can't look away from, something you can't help but fall in love with mere seconds after seeing the opening cutscene. It ignores the fact that in some alternate universe it could scare people away with its art style, instead using it as the main draw. In Pizza Tower, you play as Peppino Spaghetti, otherwise known as very fast Italian running at incredible high speed. When this motherfucker finds out his restaurant is at stake, he will stop at nothing to protect it. Except, pay his debts. I don't think business is doing too hot. As you scale the tower to confront the dreaded pizza face before he fires a laser at the pizzeria, you'll encounter unique mechanics in every level to shake things up. You'll eat spicy chicken wings, get arrested, run through the forest as a giant rat, play Five Nights at Freddy's, fight the man responsible for holding up a Domino's in Chamblee, Georgia in 1989, and war. This level changes a man. Anyway, want to play golf with a big ball of cheese? After you're done exploring a level, whether that be gunning it for the end or carefully searching for every secret, you'll run into Big John. I'm not going to explain what that means. Destroy him and pizza time begins, during which you must run all the way back through the level before the previously mentioned pizza face wakes up to catch you. Pizza time is such a chaotic and fun mechanic, giving the player time to internalize the layout of the level before shoving them back through it in a brand new way, as different doors and pathways open up on the dash back to the entrance. This is all apparently very Wario Land inspired, but I never played those games, so just gonna move on. You don't have to spend much time with Pizza Tower to notice just how much passion was poured into this game. There are tons of tiny references and Easter eggs littered throughout each beautifully unique level, and Peppino has an absolutely insane amount of sprites, some of which won't even be noticed by a lot of players. He has unique animations for different attacks, running speeds, bumping into walls, using every level mechanic, and even unique idols like freezing in the refrigerator level, intense anger while holding a high combo, or accepting his inevitable demise when the escape timer hits 0. This man does not speak a single word, and yet he is portrayed on the constant verge of an emotional breakdown with more artistry than a fucking expressionist painting. So if it wasn't clear by simply looking at this game, it's about time I mentioned that Pizza Tower can often feel like anxiety incarnate. With its wacky-ass art style, fast-paced precision platforming, banging tunes, and the many screams of terror, this is not a chill game. My only real critique of Pizza Tower is more of a warning. This is a complex, high-speed platformer that doesn't ease you into things. The tutorial throws all of Peppino's mechanics at you right out of the gate, and it can feel pretty overwhelming. He can jump, grab, throw, uppercut, body slam, sprint, dive, slide, super jump, wall climb, and like 12 other things I'm probably forgetting. I had to go back to the tutorial several times during my playthrough because while trans people can double jump, Italians can quick sprint with a grab grab roll cancel, and exit midair with a backwards grab input. Peppino's movement can feel quite clunky and slippery until you get used to things, and I spent the first few hours awkwardly slamming my head into every wall and enemy. Playing Pizza Tower once, casually, is like indulging in a painfully greasy pizza. You'll still have a great time, but you gotta take your time with it, lest you choke on the stuffed crust. At first, I could only play a level or two at a time before feeling a strange sense of exhaustion. I just couldn't understand what everyone saw in this game. I was too weak for the tower. But then, slowly but surely, I felt it. To truly appreciate all the ingredients, to understand why that specific pepperoni was placed 26 millimeters away from the sausage, you gotta get in the kitchen with Peppino himself. You gotta be the chef. You gotta go for the P ranks. I consider myself a reasonable level of gamer. I beat Celeste Farewell, I thought the Path of Pain wasn't that bad, and I was really good at Rumbleverse. My friend can vouch.
Yakko is extremely good at Rumbleverse. Dude, I'm not reading this.
So believe me when I say that P ranking levels in Pizza Tower is not for the faint of heart. To earn these illustrious scores, you have to finish a level without dropping combo while simultaneously clearing all 3 secret rooms, grabbing the treasure, and running a second lap during pizza time. It took me over an hour to get a P rank on the first level, and it doesn't get any easier from there. Even Pizza Granny will tell you it's a tough challenge, so don't feel bad if you don't want to do it. And this is coming from an NPC that normally just says shit like, kiss my ass. If you're a completionist, this game is a trip through the 7 circles of hell and back. You will see, hear, taste, smell, and feel the grease as it seeps into your veins. You gotta merge the rat brain with the rat game. You become the rat. You see this rat? That's me. I'm him. I'm that rat. I beat the whole game casually in around 6 hours, and it took me 7 to get a P rank for every level on the first floor. I don't have ADHD, but I feel like I might develop it by the time I'm done here. These levels are some of the most intense and stressful platforming challenges I've ever played. Pizza Tower takes the route designing and fast reaction finesse of speed games to the extreme. While a game like Neon White has levels that average well under a minute, Pizza Tower forces you to perfect 5 to 10 minute mazes of chaos. Dropping combo by missing a single jump several minutes in, or getting killed by some dumb fuck snowman during the second lap reveals the true meaning of despair. But within each failure lies the game's greatest secret. With each and every attempt, the level slowly transforms from a wacky little platformer into a precision racetrack where every room becomes internalized and chained together. Taking a leisurely stroll through the tower is one thing, but as you open your third eye, slam on the gas, and start plowing through innocent pedestrians, the game feels brand new all over again, and every wall, enemy placement, and secret makes perfect sense exactly where it is. If I was a lesser man, I would have said something like, I wish I could prove my gamer street cred, but with over 20 hours clocked in, I'm only halfway done. But I'm no lesser man. Did you really think I was gonna talk this highly of Pizza Tower and not procrastinate working on the video for several days in order to P rank every level and earn every single achievement in the game? Can anyone explain how I'm still single? I can't say this type of pizza is for everyone, but if you like that beautiful build of tension where the sweat beads up on your forehead as you carefully pour the tomato sauce, your hands almost slip as you reach over to sprinkle just the right amount of cheese, arms shaking as you place every ingredient, and as your legs prepare to buckle, you desperately leap to put the pizza in the oven at the last goddamn second, and the tension releases. An infernal scream echoes from your soul, and you revel in the beauty of your piping hot pizza pie. Ah! 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 Wow. Let's go! Let's go! Ah! Yes! I did it! Ah! Yo, just wanted to add a small update here. This review was written before Omega Strikers was half retired at the end of 2023. As of late 2024, the servers are still online and the game will continue to receive balance updates, but no new characters, skins, you get the idea. Anyway, back to the review. The search for online multiplayer games that don't make me want to put a bullet through my skull can often feel like a Sisyphean task. After the death of Rumbleverse, I desperately searched for something to play with my friends, something fun and replayable, and not a game where I get headshot after looting silently for 10 minutes. So after a few days, Fortnite was out of the picture. Then I played exactly 2 matches of Deceive Inc., a few hours of Divine Knockout, and unfortunately relapsed into League of Legends. Is it bad that I'm admitting that on record? Anyway, all this lead up is simply to say that I'm really glad Omega Strikers is back. It's League of Legends air hockey! Wait, no, don't go. Oh, shit. This analogy is not a joke. Omega Strikers is 3v3 MOBA-inspired air hockey. Everyone uses a basic hit to knock a core around the field, and each character has 3 unique abilities to attack opponents, outplay the enemy team, or defend their own goal. And you can also do the bunt from Lethal League where you go dink, and then you fucking... While Omega Strikers may be trying its damnedest to weasel its way into esports territory, especially since the game is designed by former League and Teamfight Tactics developers, it's all done with a certain, wow, I'm actually having fun factor, as opposed to the usual, I'd rather chop my nuts off with a rusty kitchen knife factor, also known as Valorant. It's kinda like a party game, but it's also competitive, like Lethal League. What do you mean only 3 people understand that comparison? Each character in Omega Strikers often specializes in a certain role. Estelle and Aimee can use their long-range projectiles to pressure the goal, X is an oppressive piece of shit who makes the lives of other players a nightmare by attacking them directly, and Dubu, the best character, is great at playing goalie thanks to his crowd control abilities and giant tofu wall. And he's very funny. There's a great sense of camaraderie that makes this game a joy to play with friends. You really have to communicate and work together to outsmart the enemy, carefully aiming your passes to teammates and chaining your abilities to stun opponents or score a goal. I was lucky enough to get invited to multiple playtests of Omega Strikers over the last year and a half, and it's been really cool to watch the game progress over time. As someone who only plays and reviews video games, it's always really exciting when I get the opportunity to talk to developers and learn more about how these wacky things actually get made. Plus, in one of the playtests, me and the boys were the top team on the leaderboards, and I will carry that incredibly minuscule amount of pride with me to the grave.
I will say this. The game is fun enough that I told my mom I would be skipping dinner tonight, so that's huge. That's a pretty big deal.
Whoa, that's the high praise, man.
Even during the first alpha playtest back in 2021, when the map wasn't finished, character animations were still being blocked out, and you could barely see Dubu's stupid little head on the character select screen, this game was fun as hell. It didn't need any bells and whistles. I could have spent 3 hours running around as a placeholder model, and it still would have been a blast. And I say this because I did. One of the characters was just the Dedge emote.
Can we not all play as Among Us characters, bro? What the hell?
I don't want to be Among Us.
Oh shit, I wasn't.
Yeah, let's fucking go!
Yeah!
Work in progress!
Yeah!
We're crazy.
An assist, baby! I'll take it. Okay, I really want to play a character that I understand.
Among Us!
Among Us!
Now, this is the part where things get a bit complicated. For the 30 or so hours I spent with the game in testing and beta, matches were first to 5 goals, win by 2. This resulted in an average of 5 to 10 minute matches, which really fit the simple and frantic format of the game. Everyone would also equip passive buffs before each match, which had the potential to offer build variety, but often resulted in rigid best-in-slot selections. In the full release of the game, normal and ranked are now a much longer best of 5 rounds, with each round being first to 3 goals. In between each round, you also spend 30 seconds drafting buffs from a random pool instead of equipping them beforehand. What all this leads to is matches that are 3 to 4 times longer. While these changes have proven to be somewhat controversial, I don't feel like I land on either side of being for or against them. Instead, I kinda realized that I can't see serious longevity in Omega Strikers. at least for me. The old format ended up making matches feel a bit too samey, as I only played about 5 to 10 hours of the public beta, but my gut reaction after spending time with the full release is that the new format feels like a mismatch too, an attempt to tap into the esports crowd and match complexity of other live service titles despite the game's inherent simplicity. The ability draft feels awkward since there's no real banning or counterpicking, and it's often hard to feel the passive buffs while you're still focused on the same two things, defend or score a goal. The best of 5 format also feels way too long for how intense each round is. In a game like League, you have crazy team fights, but there's also farming, respawn timers, buying items, and walking around the map. Features that pace out the energy so you don't have to operate at 100% the whole time. But in Omega Strikers, there is no downtime outside of the few seconds after a goal, and 15 to 25 minutes of near constant action and tension ends up feeling exhausting. While there's plenty of room for improvement and skill expression, and I do think there's a subset of players that will really love sinking their teeth into this game, I honestly don't know if I see myself dumping hundreds and hundreds of hours into it. I know that's basically an insult to a competitive live service game, but I do want to say that I've enjoyed just about every minute I've spent playing Omega Strikers, and I can tell the team behind it is super passionate. It's just that evaluating it on the merit of replayability gives it a much higher bar to clear than a funny little melee baseball game you spend 20 bucks on. Is it gonna replace your favorite live service game for the next 5 years? Probably not, but anime pong with the boys is still pretty damn fun.
Dude, what? He has my board!
Oh no, I shot on myself.
Oh, that was epic style.
This is the one. Knocking into my ball.
Oh my god, what a fucking play.
Yeah,
What a
Shit,
play.
there it is. There it is.
Nice.
You can also use a funny emote of my face in the game, so that makes it pretty good. If you walked up to me on the street and said the words heavy metal rhythm game FPS with dynamic music, I'd probably start foaming at the mouth. I mean, to be fair, I go feral for just about any game with adaptive music, but killing demons to the beat is pretty awesome. Metal Hellsinger is all about building up excitement and maintaining it at its peak. I am choosing my words carefully, and this still sounds like a sex thing. Oh, maybe it is. The idea is simple. Kill every demon that gets in your way with an arsenal of pistols, shotguns, and more. But the catch? Both firing and reloading weapons needs to be performed to the beat of the music. Each gun fires at a different pace in a way that can be melded into the music. The dual pistols and crossbow can shoot on every beat, the daggers toss on 2 beats and take 1 to fly back, and the shotgun is slowed to every other, which changes the feel of combat based on where you fall in the rhythm. As you internalize the momentum of each weapon, Metal Hellsinger becomes a hypnotic experience where you feel your body and soul blend into the increasing energy of each metal track as you slice and blast through hordes of enemies. Levels start out with a slow, thumping bass drum to get you acquainted with the song's tempo before carefully adding more instruments and energy with every increase of the combo meter. At 2x, the drums and backing instruments kick in for real. At 4 and 8, bass and electric guitars get thrown into the mix. And when you hit that sweet, sweet 16, your birthday present is an incredible vocal performance from a cast of talented metal performers from bands like Dark Tranquillity, Arch Enemy, and System of a Down. Every time that shit kicks in, Metal Hellsinger becomes the coolest game I've ever played, even if for just a few fleeting moments. The combo system is simple, yet works perfectly, forcing you to use fast aerial movement to jump and dash around enemies to avoid getting hit, which will lower the combo, while simultaneously requiring a constant level of precision and aggression to keep it alive. Reaching max combo isn't just for points either. The longer you hold it, the more temporary perks you'll earn that can benefit you in combat, alongside boons you equip from beating challenges in between main levels. Even walking down hallways feels intense, since you have to keep firing shots to maintain combo outside of combat. The rhythm game never stops. My only complaint is that the difficulty settings felt kinda frustrating during my initial playthrough. Even when first starting out, the Beast or Hard difficulty felt like a perfect level of challenge for fighting regular enemies, but I quickly started getting one-shotted by the bullet hell-esque bosses. This wouldn't be a problem if I could, respawn, but Hard difficulty has the additional caveat of no retries, forcing me to play the whole game on normal to learn and clear the boss fights. Problem was, after getting used to the combat on Hard for the first level or two, the rest of the game on normal ended up making most encounters feel too easy. Not a deal breaker by any means, but just something that kinda irked me considering there's an unlockable difficulty above Beast where the permadeath makes a bit more sense. That's about all I've got for Metal Hellsinger though. The first time I felt the sheer adrenaline of hitting max combo right as the chorus came around, I was sold. Oh, and if the heavy metal isn't heavy or metal enough for your tastes, you could always waste an hour modding in something like, I don't know, Sega bass fishing.
Don't crash.
Yes!
I remember this place like it was yesterday.
Oh, big one! Lower the rod!
Return of the Obra Dinn is one of those beautiful, knowledge-based, you can only play it once type games, where you feel fantastically hollow on the inside after finishing it, and can only rekindle the joy by forcing everyone you know to play it and experiencing the discovery again vicariously through them. In Obra Dinn, you have to assess the damages of a ship that has mysteriously returned after vanishing for insurance purposes. I know this sounds incredibly boring, but it's actually a mystery deduction game where you have to piece together a comprehensive log of every passenger, detailing their name and current status or cause of death. To do this, you use a magical pocket watch that allows you to view the final moments of various corpses around the ship. You're given the sounds and dialogue of each moment before being dropped into a frozen scene where you can walk around and investigate every detail. And these flashbacks aren't just like, oh heavens, I, Bungus Bonson, the ship's artist, have been shot with a pistol by Jimmy Jumbles. Okay, Bungus. The fateful events of the Obra Dinn play out in a non-linear fashion, forcing you to carefully search surrounding areas, cross-reference previously viewed events, and pick out details like the language someone is speaking or the people they spend time around to narrow down their ethnicity or occupation. That, or you just say the captain killed everyone and get an achievement. I can't say or show much else without potentially spoiling Obra Dinn's magic, but everything about this game, from the enthralling scene design to the immersive audio and unique two-color aesthetic, has made it one of my new favorite indie games. Actually, no, what makes it one of my new favorites is when you get 3 fates correct and it locks them in and it goes boom, 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 bada boom, boom, bada boom, boom, doo doo doo, boom. You get me? You know what I'm saying? Tunic is a game about the joy of discovery in its purest form, and in a similar fashion to Outer Wilds and Obra Dinn, it's a game I can't talk all that much about without spoiling its magic. Forget what you think you know about Tunic. It's not just a little isometric Zelda-looking game with a cute fox. It's much more than that. I know just go and play it isn't exactly the hardest sell, but Tunic was one of my favorite games of 2022 for a reason, and I think anyone with an interest in puzzles, mysteries, or cool indie games should drop the $30 and give this one a try. Oh, you still haven't bought it yet? What if I told you that Tunic is so good I bought the plushie? Come on, look. He's really cute. That's still not enough? Okay, fine. On paper, Tunic is an adventure game, but there are quite a few major twists, the main one being that the game's language is completely foreign, save for a few intentionally translated words and phrases. There's also no tutorial. Instead, as you explore, you'll find individual pages of the game's instruction manual, slowly revealing secrets about the world, mechanics, and controls. Everything hurts way more when I'm tired. Is this about the stamina bar or my mental health? All of this evokes the feeling of wonder that comes with learning to play games as a kid. Instead of instantly revealing everything it has to offer, the game plays its hand very carefully, opting to withhold vital information to make its world feel delightfully mysterious. Yet at the same time, you're never meant to feel truly helpless. Every page of the instruction manual hides its own secrets, and while the pen markings scattered throughout could simply be a reference to the pre-looking up a walkthrough days of old, I think they're also meant to serve as a reminder that you're not alone. You're not the first to make this journey. Maybe in an alternate world, you picked up a copy of Tunic at GameStop after the dude before you sold it back for like $1, and their successes and failures now exist to assist you on your own adventures. The way each piece slowly falls into place throughout the course of the game is just wonderful, a tightly chained series of intense combat, mind-blowing discoveries, and genius aha moments that repeatedly challenge everything you think you know about the game you're playing. As you immerse yourself in Tunic's rich atmosphere, the gorgeous sights, detailed sounds, and ethereal music, the world will whisper its secrets, and if you listen carefully, it may just help light the path ahead. A little over 3 years ago, I made the first video in this indie recommendation series, and the first game I talked about was none other than Lethal League Blaze, Team Reptile's crazy baseball fighting game. I then ended the video by getting pumped at the reveal trailer for their newest game, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. Let's fucking go! Let's fucking go! Flash forward to today, this game Bomb Rush Cyberfucks, I wrote that. Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is a video game. I don't mean this in like a factual sense, because duh. I mean this in an experiential sense. When you distill the concept of video game into an essence and shoot it straight into your veins, this is what it feels like. Oozing with flair and style, BRC is one part open zone 3D platformer with secrets and exploration, and another part graffiti spraying, trick chaining arcade combo game that's just oh so Jet Set Radio. Well, from what I've heard. I've never actually played Jet Set, so yeah. In BRC, you travel to various boroughs in an attempt to go all city, facing off in races and score attacks with rival crews while spreading your graffiti so hard that the local police send in fucking armored guards and attack helicopters. You know what, that checks out. The base trick system is very simple. You just press 3 different buttons. But when you throw in boost tricks, timer resets, manuals, rail grinding, corner leaning, and wall running, it's just one of those games that makes you feel awesome. Consistently awesome. For like 20 hours. Each map has its own flair and brings something new to the table in terms of exploration and combos. Millennium Mall has this super vertical main room where you have to wrap your way around jumps and wall runs to get to the top, and Pyramid Island is filled with twisting, spiraling rails and a tunnel system that'll pop you out at different locations. And the music, man! The sheer variety of jams included in this game is just fantastic. One moment you'll be flailing out of your seat mid-score attack to and then you're setting a new high score to a cutesy J-pop song. And then you're walking around looking for graffiti spots and while the main story provides a solid amount of content on its own, I actually spent a majority of my playtime searching for the secrets and graffiti spots scattered around each map. There's a lot of stuff here. New sprays, music tracks, vehicle skins, alternate outfits, unlockable characters, and more. And they make exploring every nook and cranny of the map feel rewarding. You might have to search for a hidden path to get on top of a building, or scour around for little entrances to underground bazaars, which is all a nice change of pace from regular missions. My one minor disappointment is that the skateboard, inline skates, and BMX operate exactly the same, so you only ever need to switch for a couple obscure little unlockables, like the garages that only open if you park in front of them with a bike, or the fire hydrant looking thing that you can spin on with the skateboard. Keeping the scale of the game's team in mind and the overall quality of everything else, this isn't really a drawback. I just think it would have been neat if there were a couple small differences between the styles in terms of speed, platforming, or trick inputs. To be honest, the only thing I wanted more of in Bomb Rush was difficulty. The story mode and optional missions are very easy, but that lack of challenge is pretty baked into the game's design. I would have loved to see more difficulty in the realm of optional races or score attacks, but since the mechanics are so streamlined, there isn't a lot of room for skill expression outside of more complicated or dangerous environments, which would have gone against the casual vibe the game is designed around. Hidden graffiti spots and collectibles often require you to make trickier jumps, and there is the occasional secret platforming area or dream sequence, but I was always itching to engage with the game's movement on a deeper level. Going for the massive multi-million combo achievements was one of my favorite parts of the experience, since it requires chaining together almost every corner and wall ride across multiple rooms to up the multiplier. But outside of missing a rare jump or hitting a set of stairs the wrong way, it's pretty hard to drop combos since boost tricks can serve as an infinite reset for your manual timer. I've obviously got my minor thoughts and annoyances, but in the face of such a passionate and exciting experience, it's like, fucking, who cares? You can literally text and drive. You can play games on your phone while weaving through traffic and grinding on rails. Now that is innovation. Doing sick tricks around a giant pyramid island while a symphony of hip-hop, future funk, DJ mixes, and sound effects are slamming my eardrums just makes me go, man, I love video games! And I can tell the developers do too. The vision is uncompromising, the style is overwhelming, and the vibes are immaculate. And they put Jet and Switch from Lethal League in as DLC, so scratch any complaints from the record. When I heard those snarky little fucks yelling,
Nailed it! Pop it!
Overclocked!
I felt like that really fucked up looking emoji, the face holding back tears one. To no one's surprise, Team Reptile knocked it out of the park once again, and I'm so pumped to see what the future holds for them. Guess you could say I just can't get enough?
Come on.
Kick it off! Yeah! Digging it!
Alright, so you've played Bomb Rush, loved it, earned every combo achievement like a true gamer, and now you're looking for something to really test your skills. Maybe a 3D platformer with fast and fluid movement mixed with the freedom of a Metroidvania, all in a low-poly graphical style where the main character is a goat with a huge ass? Wait, damn girl, are you the song Precious Thing from the Bomb Rush Cyberfunk original soundtrack? Because... Pseudoregalia was originally made for a game jam before being expanded into a lovely bite-sized experience where you platform around a castle, fight little monsters, and obtain new movement abilities to solve puzzles and search for hidden collectibles. It's only a few hours long, which was a refreshing change of pace for a Metroidvania. But in addition to this little indie game having some of the most satisfying movement I've ever seen in a 3D platformer, my favorite part about Pseudoregalia is how every new move adds onto a growing sense of expressiveness. What starts as a simple 3D platformer with a jump button quickly evolves as every new ability effortlessly integrates into your existing moveset, allowing you to explore each room in a variety of ways. As you internalize the game's movement and start chaining everything together, you can start creating your own skips and even find a handful of sequence breaks. For example, the pole jump comes with a hidden backflip if you cancel it mid-air, so you can easily climb high ledges by pole jumping, kicking off a wall, and then immediately backflipping to turn around and grab it. I also managed to check out the final area early and grab the wall run ability by using the same trick, instead of first finding the slide jump, which is the more intended method. I'm sure many areas were designed like this on purpose, but whether I was actually cheating the intended order or not, my platforming skills were constantly being put to the test, and I was in the fucking zone for every second of it. I didn't put this game down till I was done. Plus, it's just incredibly satisfying to backtrack through the whole map once you've collected the movement abilities, wall running and slide jumping through what were once challenging rooms in the blink of an eye. I was just sitting in a Discord call, and in the span of 2 hours, I think I said, "Oh my god, that's so cool," at least 5 times. I'm starting to think 3D platformers are the objectively best game genre. The music's great too, simple but fits the PS1 aesthetic perfectly. I especially like the uneven tempo of Listless Library, which gives it a sleepy, comforting feeling, like it's being played from a music box. I also love Paramnesiac, the final boss theme, cause I don't know, it's really good. Again, I'm just floored at how impressive this game is, and priced at a mere $6, it's a no-brainer of a recommendation. The fact that it was made by a single developer after a game jam is even more mind-boggling, so I'm very excited to see what they cook up next. She go deep on my rock till I'm galactic. She rock me deep till I'm galactic. She go galactic on my rock till I'm deep? What?
We got a hell of a blip heading your way, team. Get ready.
Oh yeah, let's do this. We are unbreakable. Rock and stone.
With over 190,000 reviews on Steam, Deep Rock Galactic is by no means an underrated indie game, but it is a fantastic one, and it's also one of the games I get asked to talk about most frequently. Okay, fuck, stop it! So if you already know it, just enjoy a few minutes of me singing its praises, because I know at least a couple of you fuckers are here from the thumbnail. I gotta get people interested in weird shit somehow. Deep Rock Galactic is the dwarven fantasy. Getting drunk, killing bugs, and making money.
We're rich. We're rich. We're rich. We're rich. We're rich.
This is an unspoken rule of the game. If you see a gold chunk, everyone just runs up and pings the hell out of it, and it never stops being funny.
Mushroom.
Enough about the mushrooms.
Deep Rock is a PvE first-person shooter where you and up to 3 other dwarves go on various missions to kill bugs, fight bosses, and extract precious resources. On some missions, you might be mining for rare minerals or setting up pipes to extract liquid morkite, also the pipes are grind rails, that part is very important, and other times you'll have to fight a giant floating robot triangle. It's incredibly replayable thanks to procedurally generated map layouts that heavily impact exploration and combat encounters, alongside a random rotation of various mini-bosses and events. On top of that, there are environment modifiers like low oxygen, more minerals, or ghost bugs to keep you on your toes, along with 5 different hazard levels and multi-mission long deep dives if you're really looking to up the tension.
See, dude, this is why I said we do Has 5. Like, they're just like me, man. They want to feel something. You know? Has 4 will not do the job.
Don't ever go to a casino.
This might already sound like a hell of a lot on its own, but don't worry, I haven't even started talking about the class system yet. Each of the 4 classes, Engineer, Driller, Gunner, and Scout, can contribute to the team in different ways, be it by building turrets and platforms, quickly digging holes, setting up zip lines for transportation, or lighting up rooms and grappling to resources. Each of these classes can be leveled up and promoted, unlocking upgrade trees for their weapons and entirely alternate weapons. You can also also earn overclock cores, which can be equipped to a weapon to drastically change the way it functions, turning a laser gun into a stationary spinning death blaster or modding a shotgun to launch you into the air. Plus, since every mission has different objectives, terrain, and combat encounters, there's no one best build for every situation, encouraging you to experiment with different combinations. But my favorite part about this game has to be the atmosphere, both in its own silliness and how its gameplay design inspires a positive community. In the hub area, drinks at the bar are used to grant small perks before a mission, but you can also order wacky concoctions that make you blast around or teleport out into space.
I feel like I should be concerned about this.
Oh boy.
Oh shit. Oh god. Oh, where am I? Oh, what's happening?
Limited events will add mini objectives and cute decorations. There's tons of funny unlockable cosmetic items. The dwarves constantly sing and yell at each other during missions. There's a dedicated cheer button.
For Rockin' Stone!
And there's literally an achievement for successfully kicking a barrel into every available seat on the drop pod. I didn't even know it existed. I just did it because I was bored and thought it would be funny. This isn't some hyper-intensive PvP experience. It's a game about shouting drunk dwarves on a bug-killing spree. And there are a lot of subtle ways the game helps remind players that everyone is on the same team. There's no active scoreboard to monitor. Kills are collaborative efforts and help keep everyone safe, and every mineable resource is shared between the party. Most interactables, like building and defense points, are more efficient with multiple hands, and many objectives can be made easier by tossing objects to allies. The engineer can help the scout by placing platforms in high places, the driller can dig through walls for a more convenient escape route, and the list goes on. Playing with less experienced dwarves never feels like a burden, but instead an opportunity to help them learn while showing off a bit of your gaming prowess every time you revive them. And in the event that you accidentally blow someone up or get shot in the face, well, that's just comedy.
Retrieving escape pod.
Wait, he's on the. Wait,
He died.
It's clear that all of these choices have paid off wonderfully for Deep Rock, inspiring a welcoming community for players of all skill levels, even when it comes to the smallest gesture, like being greeted with a chorus of rockin' stones after dropping into a mission in progress. The one big critique I do have with Deep Rock is that while this game feels absolutely tailor-made for kicking back with the boys and having fun, it's pretty difficult to unlock new weapons and content unless you play alone or in random lobbies that share your current mission. If you're working towards getting a new weapon or promotion and your friends have a different mission in their set or want to do standard weeklies, you have to abort your current selection and lose all progress to pick something new. I'd personally like to see some changes to the mission system that let me make progress more consistently, especially when I'm onboarding new players. But even just being able to put one set of missions on pause to go do weeklies or sync up with friends would go a long way. Despite this issue, Deep Rock has quickly become one of my new favorite multiplayer games, and always puts a big smile on my face every time I hop back in. I've dropped over 90 hours so far and feel like I've barely scratched the surface. Although I'm willing to bet a few of those hours were spent platforming around like the floor is lava while I wait for everybody to log on and pick their loadout. While I usually stick to playing online games with friends, I've actually had a lot of fun playing solo. The random players I've encountered online have been really funny, relaxed, and forgiving. I think that's just the kind of community you can foster when your game isn't built around intense competition, and when you have a rockin' stone button.
Rockin' Stone forever!
It's just wonderful to see a game as unique as Deep Rock thrive in the cutthroat world of online multiplayer, and I can tell that the devs at Ghost Ship Games are still striving to make it the best they possibly can. At its core, Deep Rock is built around camaraderie, cooperation, and plain old fun, and it does a damn good job at all three.
When its health gets to 0, do not be in like the fucking same zip code as it, okay? Just like be far away from it.
Oh well, somebody's right next to it.
Fuck.
Alright, how about a short and sweet recommendation? If you watched my last Indies video, or if you play too many games like I do, you might be familiar with Return of the Obra Dinn, a mystery deduction game in which you piece together the fateful events of a missing ship by exploring the final moments of its many deceased passengers. Case of the Golden Idol functions similarly and is an absolute joy to play. It's a genius little point-and-click detective game with a striking pixel art style that sometimes makes me feel like I'm playing it inside Hypnospace Outlaw. In Golden Idol, you're told the story of a mysterious ancient relic as it trades hands, and as you investigate each case, you'll find tons of little details. Private letters, newspapers, crime scene weapons, talking heads, dead bodies, and more. These details are then converted to words that you use to fill out various puzzles. Most cases have shared puzzles like identifying every person in the scene and filling out a recap of the events that transpired, but the game carefully evolves with each case to keep things interesting. Shit starts out like, so there's two guys here, who killed who? But by the end, you're in full writing shit down on paper mode, like, alright, Bungus Bonson wore 5 silly hats to work last week. Now, according to the 4 virtues, that should dock him about 26 points, but the archer card he played does beat the boar. However, according to the positioning of the moon, we are in the Western Castle, which would change things because he's wearing the funny scarecrow mask. What the fuck? The base game took me about 4 hours to complete, which might be a bit short for some, but I kinda love games that are short and sweet. Golden Idol grips you with its immersive atmosphere and then races you through a wide variety of clever ideas without ever overstaying its welcome. And if you find yourself itching for more, there are 2 DLC expansions that throw you right into the deep end with challenges that rival the final missions of the base game. It's great stuff. Uh-oh, serious game alert, no jokes. Or maybe I'm just too lazy to write them. In Citizen Sleeper, you assume the role of a sleeper robot with an emulated mind between the boundary of human and machine. After escaping from your corporation, you find yourself on the Eye, a giant space colony at the edge of the universe. It's then up to you to make a new life for yourself while dealing with the past as it tries to catch up to you. Structurally, it's pretty simple. It's a sci-fi visual novel with role-playing elements built around dice rolls. Every cycle, you'll get a set of dice to perform various actions around the Eye. To keep yourself alive, you'll have to balance earning money, buying food for energy, and finding stabilizers to keep your condition intact. As the worse it gets, the less dice you get to roll. And the most interesting part of it all? Forced autosave. It feels weird that the thing my brain decided to focus on for this review is a technical decision outside the realm of the game itself, rather than a major plot point or aesthetic choice, but I think it's what helps Citizen Sleeper feel so compelling. There's a constant sense of tension at every dialogue choice and dice roll because you can't go back. You can't test the waters and try again. It removes the very notion of save scumming from the back of your mind and completely immerses you in the Eye's rich world as you feel the weight of every decision, whether immediate or delayed, forcing you to balance your own survival with the strict time limit of certain events. I played it for 5 hours straight the first day and got so immersed that I was throwing stressful dice rolls in my dreams that night. The one thing my mind got snagged on a bit as I played is that this tension can fade as you progress. On some levels, this feels like an intended piece of storytelling, reflecting the cutthroat struggle to stay alive in the early cycles before slowly building a life for yourself as the stories of others unfold. But by the time you've racked up skill passives and roll bonuses, the game loses a bit of its edge as the few time-gated quests become far less demanding. I do think some of this has to do with the fact that a lot of the endgame content is from 3 free episode updates that weren't part of the original experience, though. While they're some of the best stories the game has to offer, several additional hours of dialogue supplemented by slotting in dice with max stats and no consequences feels like the narrative rocket decoupling its role-playing cargo to go a little bit faster. However, if I had to rate this game simply on how much I enjoyed it, I'd give it a perfect score. As you progress, Citizen Sleeper becomes less about survival and more about building communities, supporting others, and finding a place to call home amidst the chaos. At first, I was almost put off by this shift in decisions. I half expected the entire game to be one long chain of life-threatening choices. but the writing gripped me so tightly that it didn't even matter. I was making dialogue choices that felt impossible and heartbreaking, yet with a clear answer in mind. Every story is masterfully written, so much so that even as you're reading the backstory of a chef who asked you to find mushrooms for his cooking, you're sitting there like, maybe I don't play enough writing-focused games, maybe it's recency bias, maybe it's that every ending line felt like a quote I want to sear into my mind, but this might be one of my new favorite narrative games of all time. I mean, when most of your game is a visual novel, it makes it a bit easier, but the quality of writing on display here, which was all done by a solo dev, by the way, is incredibly moving. Ironically, for a game about being a sleeper, an emulated mind drifting between the memories and consciousness of its past life and new existence as a machine, the first word that comes to mind in describing it is human. It's lovely. Whenever I find a game this cool and this niche, there's always a little internal struggle. On one hand, I'm excited that I get to introduce it to so many people for the first time. But on the other, why the fuck hasn't everyone played Brutal Orchestra? Hieronymus Bosch's Brutal Orchestra is the comically twisted journey of a man's endless quest for revenge in the barren wastelands of purgatory. In other words, it's a roguelike. Now, the general pitch of its gameplay is a bit more complicated than that. It's a turn-based strategy game where you can move each of your characters around on a grid once per turn, and use abilities that affect different locations on said grid. But to use abilities, you need pigment, which enemies and allies drop when hit based on the color of their health bar, but you can also take self-damage to cast a move with the incorrect pigment. And if you have too much pigment in your inventory, your whole team will take damage at the end of a turn, and I'm running out of breath. In short, it's brutal. Orchestra. The defining trait of Brutal Orchestra's combat is the timeline, a detailed description of every enemy action that will occur once you end your turn. Barring a few exceptions, you know exactly what every enemy is going to do and where they're going to do it. This allows for an incredibly methodical system that forces you to carefully analyze these actions and switch up your strategy accordingly. You'll have to consider what pigment the enemy will drop, how damaging them might affect their status or location, and where your characters are going to land at the end of each turn, all while occasionally perusing the glossary to double check what all the passives and status effects mean. But even with plenty of preparation and deliberate choices, the game is still meant to, fuck with you a little bit. If you don't kill enemies fast enough, they'll debuff you, shuffle around, eat all your pigment, give you too much pigment, or transform into entirely new enemies. And I want you to guess what happens when the Music Man transforms. The music changes. The fucking music changes! Every run manages to feel unique thanks to an incredibly varied cast of characters. While your more basic recruits can do standard stuff like attack forward into the sides, inflict debuffs, and heal, there's plenty of wacky shit as well. Characters that refresh their turns, redirect damage to allies, light enemies and themselves on fire. There's just a statue, he can't move. While it does take a bit of time to unlock new characters and items, the game grows more complex with each run as you realize that it's not just items that synergize with characters in interesting ways. This isn't your average roguelike where you play as one guy. Since you've got an entire party, characters and their items can synergize with each other. To give you an idea of how deep this can go, let's say you've got Fennec in your party. With his passive, he deals damage to the opposing enemy every time he takes direct damage. Good tank. Now put Splig in your party. He can change an ally's health color to his current health color, which switches between red and blue. Boom, now Fennec's health color is red instead of blue. Now that you have more red pigment, throw in Leviat, who uses red pigment to whip an enemy for a bunch of damage. But he also hits the ally to his right. But the ally to the right is Fennec, who triggers his passive to deal damage to the opposing enemy. And oh look, we gave Fennec the Grumpy Gump item, which deals 5 extra damage to the opposing enemy after taking any damage. What I'm saying is that it's a little more complex than selecting Tackle. Over the course of a run, you'll often encounter well over 5 party members. If you're confident enough in a huge damage setup, you can fill all 5 slots. But once attacks become unavoidable and enemies start to bust out the synergies, it can often feel better to stick with 3 or 4 to better avoid taking damage. In addition to the normal level fucked up things enemies can do, there's also advanced level fucked up things they can do when they chain shit together. Like if this one boss pours oil all over you and makes you slippery and you end your turn in the fire placed on the floor by the other boss, you die instantly because you're covered in oil. But sometimes the Loch Ness Monster gives you a little kiss. How nice. Oh, he ate me. Brutal Orchestra is great at instilling dread through its punishing gameplay while still finding time to sprinkle wacky comedy into its abstract atmosphere. Interactions with NPCs and recruitable characters are incredibly charming and remind me a lot of Shin Megami Tensei, where you can only recruit new team members by choosing the right dialogue options or fulfilling their bizarre requests. And everyone you talk to is at least a bit of an asshole.
I want you to take all your thoughts, comments, and opinions and shove them so far up your ass that I can't even hear a smothered whisper.
Kinda sounds like my YouTube comments. The music is also fucking killer. I know it's hard to differentiate with soundtracks when I say just about every one of them is good, but Brutal Orchestra's is fantastic. Every track matches the type of enemy you're fighting, from silly, funky tunes for weird fishmen, to a chorus of marching band horns in perfect sync with the dancing eyes of shadowy figures, to some absolutely demonic fucker 1 million BPM shit for the final boss. Also, if you're really into abstract depictions of life, death, religion, and humanity, you will love diving into this world. Even more so if you're one of the 5 or 6 people out there that's an avid gamer and a fan of the Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch, the guy that the game is inspired by. Yeah, those people are gonna lose their minds when they find out about this one. There's not much else left for me to say, other than that in addition to being charmed by every single piece of this game's aesthetic, the pixel art, the writing, and the music, I genuinely think this is one of the best turn-based combat systems I've ever seen, and that Brutal Orchestra deserves a spot alongside the other greats in the roguelike genre. Next up might be the most video game on this list, if that makes any sense. Go Mecha Ball. Twin stick arcade shooter meets roguelike meets fucking pinball. I don't know of very many ball type games. The gameplay is super simple and super duper satisfying. Roll around each room shooting a variety of weapons while repeatedly turning into a ball that can boost into enemies to deal damage and cancel their attacks. Each area is designed as a perfect little playground to utilize your spherical nature. Bounce pads, pinball bumpers, fans, boosts, and ramps to facilitate incredibly fast-paced, hectic combat where the guns mean nothing if you aren't balling. Utilizing your ability to speed up, bounce off of enemies, and collide with them is essential to holding your combo, especially as you try to conquer the game's 5 difficulty levels, which give enemies more complexity through added mechanics like shields that can only be broken through collision. The star of the show here is the core moment-to-moment gameplay. It just feels so good to be this ball. They fine-tuned this shit to perfection. Flying off ramps, blasting through the air, bouncing on top of an enemy, coming out of the ball, pulling out the shotgun, blasting a dude in the face, knocking another dude off the edge, rolling back up and flying off into the sunset. Mwah! Magnifique! I'm doing the chef kiss thing with my hand right now. What isn't quite as strong is the roguelike implementation. Don't get me wrong, this is some of the most pure arcade fun I've had in a while, and I clocked a respectable 10 hours in just a couple days, but arcade shooter is definitely the focus here. There's a solid amount of abilities and weapons to add some variety, but each area has exactly one boss for a total of 4, and the 3 unlockable characters don't have any big differences other than starting perks and stat spread. Realistically though, it's pretty hard to find any actual downsides here, and if you're looking for a game that just makes you feel like you're really good at video games, Go Mecha Ball is more than ready to deliver. The mechanics are polished to perfection, the visuals are gorgeous, the sound design is impactful, the music is dynamic and jammin', and being a ball is just really fun. That's all I've got. If you're here for any analysis deeper than ballin', then I don't know what to tell you. Laika Aged Through Blood is a self-proclaimed Motorvania, a Metroidvania on a motorcycle, where you play as a mother coyote defending her daughter and tribe from an army of warmongering birds. As an artistic experience, every aspect from visuals to audio to writing is incredibly compelling. A gorgeous art style of cute, brightly colored animals serves as a stark contrast to the game's bleak post-apocalyptic world, with a gameplay loop of shooting birds, watching their blood splatter all over Laika and her bike mid-flip as she collects their guts to use as currency. Like, holy fuck. When I picked up Laika near the end of 2023, it had been quite a while since I'd played a Metroidvania, but when the trailer said, yeah, but what if the movement was like Trials and you shoot guns in bullet time and do a backflip to reload, I went, okay, where's my wallet? I want to preface this recommendation with a bit of a warning. I'm not trying to scare anyone off with some insane difficulty, but Laika is a very precise and punishing game that requires patience, as a lot of the negative reviews concern early frustration with the general control scheme and core mechanics. It's also a game where you die in one hit, whether that's from getting shot, blown up, or flipping your bike incorrectly. I mean, it's no Celeste, but still. Once you get over the initial learning curve, doing flips and brakes and drifts and wheelies feels fantastic. Laika truly shines in its main objectives and exploration. As you journey to sabotage bird operations, you're dropped in a world filled with perfectly constructed loop-de-loops, ramps, and platforms, alongside challenging arrangements of birds and obstacles that play out like little room-based challenges. Think Katana Zero or Hotline Miami. Combat requires experimentation and deliberate action. As you fly through the air, you have to consider how much ammo is in your gun, if you should backflip to reload, which direction you should angle your bike to block or parry bullets, if you should front flip to reload your parry, and if an enemy's corpse might block your shot when aiming behind them. It's a lot, but damn is it satisfying. Unfortunately, the place where I feel the game falters most is in its Metroidvania elements, which is a shame considering it's one of the biggest selling points. Outside of the few side quests involving Laika's mother, which feel so important that I wish they were part of the main story, almost none of the additional content felt worth doing. 90% of side quests involve fetching an item or playing telephone between two characters, with the rewards being crafting materials I had way too many of by the end of the game. Re-exploring the world doesn't feel as new or exciting as it often can in other Metroidvanias because there are only a couple major abilities unlocked across the entire playthrough, the main one being a shotgun that can double as an extra jump of sorts. Plus, the game's intensity can also be a drawback. Since riding the bike and killing enemies requires constant precision, backtracking can become a bit of a pain, especially with how the fast travel points are placed. While I did find myself enjoying the stories of the town's residents, I lost interest in completing many of their quests in favor of simply finishing the game. However, the area where Laika shines brightest is in its aesthetic. It doesn't look to hold anything back and uses its time to tell a dark and violent story about the horrors of war, cycles of oppression, and realities of womanhood, backed by an absolutely beautiful soundtrack by Baikoli that serves as one of the standouts of the entire game. As you explore the map, you'll slowly expand your collection of mellow, haunting vocal tracks that create just a vibe when paired with the brutal gameplay of tearing through birds with shotguns and rocket launchers.
I wanna go slow.
In short, despite a few minor holdups, Laika was one of the best indie games I played last year, and it has an incredibly bold vision that I don't see all that often, so definitely give it a shot if any of this caught your attention. I want to also end this review with a little note about how I write these videos. I tend to get nervous that straying too far into explaining my gripes with a game will make this Indie Games You Should Try series feel less like wholehearted suggestions and more like critical reviews, but I definitely play more than my fair share of games, and when something makes it into one of these videos, it truly means I enjoyed it, and my criticism comes from a place of genuine care. I hope the ideas I present serve as an interesting addition or consideration to an otherwise one-dimensional recommendation, rather than scaring people away from trying a new experience. Because, let's face it, the only perfect game is Rumbleverse, and you can't disprove me because it doesn't exist anymore! Bullet hells are sick as hell. I'm not good at real bullet hell games, can't even beat the second level of Ikaruga, but I love them anyway. They're games that require such precise analysis and memorization of hectic situations that they become almost relaxing in their transcendence of the gamer plane. But while a lot of bullet hells are about memorizing the same fights or levels and perfecting them, what if we added a bit of randomness into the mix? And by a bit, I mean a lot, because the Void Rains Upon Her Heart is a roguelike, baby!
Wait, hang on. I'm still looking for my wallet.
As you may be able to tell from the title, genre choices, and overall aesthetic, Void Rains is a game that goes all in on its vision. You play as a handful of alien girls who can fire hearts to love the dangerous monsters that attack them. At times it is charming, and at others quite strange, but always boldly its own. Also, every character portrait is artistically naked, which I decided to cover up with the game's fine mist setting for the sake of this video being monetized. Alright, so where do I even start? In each section of a run, you're given a selection of bosses to choose from with different mechanics, attacks, and weaknesses. Despite technically being in early access, Void Rains has an insane wealth of fights to learn and conquer. I'm talking over 100 since the game's most recent update. What elevates these fights even further is the leveling system. Based on the difficulty of your run, the bosses will have different levels, which changes the intensity of their attacks and can even add additional mechanics. It's really neat being introduced to a boss at level 1 and going, oh, that's not too bad, and then fighting them later at level 12 and going, oh, that shit I said back there? Come on the bridge. Can I get you anything? The boss you choose to fight in each area will also impact what rewards they'll drop, spanning your standard roguelike gamut of healing, damage, elemental attacks, defense, new shot types. You get the drill. The other interesting part about the game's combat is that it isn't just focused on killing the boss as fast as possible. If you want better rewards and more Tetrid pieces for unlocks and upgrades, you have to balance not taking damage with dealing constant damage to maintain your combo, while also breaking off specific pieces of armor or killing additional spawns. The aspect of Void Rains that stood out to me the most is the sheer amount of content. Hundreds of bosses, pickups, and upgrades, special encounters and events, 7 unlockable characters, and 4 additional game modes, including a mode where you design builds to fight bosses in quick play, challenge towers with special mechanics, and endless mode, and an extended version of the regular story runs. It's the kind of design that makes for a deep roguelike experience once it all starts to click, but the way progression is presented can feel a bit overwhelming, especially with numerous tutorial dialogues during the early hours of gameplay. My one major complaint is that it takes a long time to truly understand what's going on and feel even slightly in control of how your build develops during runs. In the early game, you might as well just throw yourself at the boss with the highest level items, because you can't see what said item drops are or what bosses are weak to until you spend Tetrids to permanently reveal them. While rushing down enemies and unlocking new content was still a blast, I didn't enjoy having almost almost zero agency in the early stages, and I struggled with the higher difficulties I kept brazenly attempting, as it took me 10 to 20 hours before really being able to consider my options. While unlocks are mostly in the form of horizontal progression, which I prefer for roguelikes, tetrads are required for everything, from minor character upgrades to bosses, to 5 types of gifts, to encounters, to event descriptions, to backgrounds. With all this content, Void Rains becomes a completionist's dream. Or nightmare. If you like fighting bosses over and over again at different difficulties without getting hit to earn rainbow medals, or grinding tetrads to unlock every card, or fighting bosses in specific ways to earn the whopping 697 achievements, and probably more by the time you're watching this, then Void Rains will be your jam. It's the kind of game where you beat it for the first time and your save file says 2.2% completed and you go, oh shit. I've dropped nearly 30 hours into Void Rains and my save file isn't even at 40%, but the fact that I've logged that much time as is despite the million games in my backlog means I very much think it's worth your time. And money. Dude, it's 13 bucks! I've also saved my favorite detail for last. At least with the info I was able to find, this is a solo dev project. Music, art, game design, everything. When you roll credits, it shows a single name. Angel Polanco. Void Rains has been in early access for 6 years, and all that time, he's been updating it constantly, with patches every 2 to 3 weeks and bigger updates every month or two. Like, wow. Holy fuck, even. I've talked about this before in my video about Spark 3, but I just find it so inspiring to play a niche passion project like Void Rains, a game with under 1,000 reviews, and be absolutely blown away by the sheer amount of creative output born from even just one passionate developer. They went, yeah, I'm gonna make a shmup bullet hell roguelike about hope and love with naked aliens, put it in early access, and just work on that shit for 6 years. And to that I say, you want a unique string of words? How about psychedelic bullet heaven breakcore roguelike with a surreal transhumanist horror story straight out of an RPG Maker game priced at $5? Did that wake you up? Passionately dedicated to its aesthetic, Picayune Dreams feels like its own soundtrack given physical form, an aggressively hectic experience that drills into your brain until you're so in the zone that you don't feel like playing anything else until you've seen it through to the end. Menus where you can't understand how any given upgrade will improve your modified robo-human body until you analyze their corresponding lines of code. A nightmarish journey through space where you shoot at 3D models of talking burgers and floating hands and fight wacky bosses like a bunny and a rad biker dude. After the incredible success of Vampire Survivors, more than a few devs have attempted to grab a small piece of its breakout stardom, but Picayune Dreams is the only other bullet heaven horde survival type game to have really caught my attention for a handful of different reasons. As for the gameplay, it's pretty simple. Move around while shooting at enemies and collecting the experience numbers they drop until you level up, allowing you to choose from one of 3 random upgrades, which can be weapons like saws, yo-yos, and lock-on missiles, or more passive augments like speed, knockback, and a regenerating shield. Continue shooting, continue upgrading, and continue gaming. Every 5-ish minutes, you'll be confronted by a boss as they engage you in a bullet hell barrage where you try to survive against one very strong enemy rather than hundreds of tiny ones. Each boss has unique mechanics and bullet patterns that demand quick thinking if you want to survive. Which, at first, you might not. Thankfully, there's a permanent progression system that helps add variety to further attempts, and I do enjoy this skill tree being a lot more situational than your usual vertical progression. Instead of flat upgrades like damage, health, and money, you can repeatedly respec your limited skill points to experiment with different builds, from crit damage explosions and status effects, to re-rolling health pickups or dealing extra damage while standing still. However, I don't feel like the core builds managed to stack up to something like the evolution system in Vampire Survivors. After experimenting with every upgrade and trying out a handful of combinations, I quickly discovered a best setup to the point that I just kept running it in my pursuit of the true ending, which requires you to beat the 4 main boss fights without taking damage in a single run. But while this game isn't some infinitely replayable time vortex, it isn't necessarily trying to be. And to me, what it was aiming for is even more compelling. In addition to each boss having fun pre-fight banter, when you defeat them for the first time, you're given a little interactive RPG-esque cutscene that provides cryptic backstory and insight into your mission. While I had no idea what to expect going in, Picayune Dreams told an engaging story that I definitely understood, without having to look some of it up afterwards. While the 10 or so hours I logged in pursuit of experiencing all the cutscenes is a bit shorter than you might expect from a game with bullet heaven design, I still had a blast, and the overwhelming artistry is more than enough for a strong recommendation on its own. Honestly, I'd buy this shit again just for the soundtrack. You want to hear a 3-phase final boss throw Vocaloid lyrics into the breakcore? Then just buy Picayune Dreams already, because I'm not going to show you the song. Jeez. Brace yourself, buckle up, strap in, do whatever you need to do because it's Rain World time. Rain World is a 2D platformer where you play as a slug cat, a small but agile creature struggling to survive in a hostile mechanical world. The game teaches you very little, as in the basic controls and how to rest in hideouts after eating food, and the rest is up to you. What to eat, what to avoid, where to go. While there are subtle hints scattered across the map, Rain World is not a game with a clear objective. Make one wrong turn while trying to follow the game's cryptic hints, or simply in the pursuit of non-linear exploration, like I did, and you might find yourself lost in what feels like an impossible series of challenges and dead ends. Early on, I was talking to some friends who had already beaten the game, and I said, yeah, I'm in the chimney canopy, got there from the industrial complex, and I'm gonna climb the wall next. And they fucking laughed at me. Rain World's unusually cryptic exploration paired with its dynamic regions that can range from serene to bullshit unfair is not a common experience in the world of video games, which is why it can be such a tricky game to discuss and recommend. Rain World was an experience unlike anything I've ever played, and that alone is worth a lot, but it isn't memorable because it was easy, or even enjoyable at times. It is both fascinating and extremely frustrating to play a game that does not care about you. A game with a complex ecosystem, with creatures that you hunt and creatures that hunt you alongside other creatures that will hunt those creatures or try to steal your limp body out of the mouth of the creature that originally hunted you. There are monkey dudes that trade and communicate and bugs that bait you into traps with food. It's a game where sometimes RNG will just fuck you over, because hey, that's life, and it just so happens that this lizard was looking to grab a slug cat burger from the drive-thru the second I went through a pipe.
Oh my god.
Upon looking back, much of what makes Rain World feel rewarding is the constant sense of discovery as you explore, rather than measurable progress towards a goal. How to efficiently gather food in each new area, how to escape an enemy using the various plants and objects at your disposal, or how to look and listen for threats before it's too late. You can't just gun it through the story of Rain World. You have to develop an understanding of the world around you. Over the past couple years, I've given Rain World a shot for an hour or two, but never really stuck with it until now. It is a trial you have to want to understand, and a lot of the frustration during my playthrough came from the weight of expectations I felt after my friends gave it such glowing reviews. I tried powering through the confusion and deaths to find what makes the game so good. Surely I'm just not there yet, I told myself as I explored the world for hours upon hours. And then, at a point, sure, might have been 10 or 15 hours in, but better late than never, I realized I was in the midst of what I was searching for. I noticed the stunning artistry of every area I explored. Visuals of rusted machinery against a wide open sky, wildlife thriving even in the bleakest conditions, paired with a hauntingly quiet soundscape that gives an almost meditative quality to the calmer moments of exploration. I wasn't struggling to get to an experience. The survival, the journey, the backtracking, the failures, the atmosphere, and the struggle itself were all part of the experience. You know how we usually say, I beat the game when we finish something? Well, the difference between most games and Rain World is that while most games are carefully nudging you towards the finish line, Rain World is a game that has no problem kicking you into the dirt. When I beat it, I really felt like I beat it. I think a healthy dose of frustration is another piece of what makes the experience feel so unique. It's what makes the calm moments feel like a true reward rather than a walk between objectives. Like, if I just put this area on screen for a sec and say unfortunate development, I know it'll send shivers down at least one person's spine. During each and every play session, I could only stomach Rain World for an hour or so. I would die one too many times to some bullshit, go, man, fuck this game, and quit for the day. But then, curiosity would build. How far away is the next hideout? How can I overcome this challenge? What surprises might I find next? And before I knew it, I'd be right back in. Rain World is an uncompromising experience filled with so many unique ideas and secrets that it isn't hard to understand why it's developed such a cult following. It's a game designed to make you contemplate your own insignificance amidst an unforgiving landscape, but it also gives you space to adapt and appreciate your surroundings as it evolves from a typical video game into something that resembles a living, breathing world. There's also a bug that doubles as a grappling hook, so maybe that's the part everyone was raving about. Alright, how about we calm things down a little? Sometimes games are too active. Sometimes you don't want to fear for your life every 5 seconds or be hard focused on landing every gunshot mid-backflip. Sometimes you just want to click on some stuff. The Gnorp Apologue is a lovely little idle clicker strategy game that gives me a faint glimpse of what CoComelon feels like for the developing brain of an infant. The plan is simple. The Gnorps want to break the rock. Click on the rock to break off shards, and click on them again to move them into the collection zone to use as currency. But repeatedly clicking on stuff is lame. Let's build some houses for the Gnorps and put them to work as rock slammers and shard collectors to do the job for you. Once things get rolling, you'll start unlocking all sorts of buildings and Gnorp specializations, along with a slew of upgrades to maximize damage and collection. As you deal enough damage to the rock, it will compress, making the shards more valuable and the next compression event more difficult, to which you can respond by resetting your progress to earn talent points, unlocking additional traits that further Gnorp the shit out of the rock. This isn't a game that simply progresses from being left running in the background for hundreds of hours. There's a surprising level of depth that requires strategizing and combining the right synergies and talents for prime optimization. You might start with slammers and collectors, but you will quickly discover the might of time-traveling bombers, explosive Gatling guns, ice arrows, Xynorps, and rockets. And I mean a lot of rockets, like a lot of them. For the true enthusiasts, once you beat the game, you can also try your hand at speedrun mode, where your strategies will have to be further refined to reach the end as soon as possible. The Gnorp Apologue is so simple and enjoyable that there isn't really anything else to say. I love watching these little dudes go to work, and maybe you will too. When people talk about the greatest indie games of all time, there are a handful of usual suspects: Celeste, Hollow Knight, Hades, Outer Wilds, but I'd like to add another that not as many people have heard of: CrossCode, because it's really good. I'm far from the first person to make this discovery. After all, you guys have been asking me to play CrossCode for a while now. And by a while, I mean 5 years. Sorry, I was busy that day. It's kinda hard to write a simple elevator pitch for this one because there's a lot going on. Set inside a fictional MMO called Cross Worlds, CrossCode is an action RPG with a robust combat system, heaps of exploration, and massive 2D Zelda-inspired puzzle dungeons. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's start with exploration. In addition to its bustling towns filled with NPCs, side quests, and trading stalls, the various regions of CrossCode are kinda like huge outdoor dungeons, a bunch of interconnected rooms filled with enemies, items, and puzzles that can span half the map. Every time I reached a new area, I found myself exploring for hours at a time to uncover as many little secrets as I could, even though it would have only taken a few minutes to run straight to the next town. As you progress through the main quest line, you'll encounter the main source of puzzles, massive temples that test your skills with a new element before gifting it to you for use in both puzzle solving and combat. These dungeons have some incredibly satisfying brainbusters and often took me several hours to get through, culminating in fantastic boss fights that turn into real-time action puzzles as you incorporate recently discovered elemental mechanics. Plus, even when the combat isn't being clever, it's just good ol' edgier-seat shrimp mode gaming, carefully aiming ranged shots and blocking attacks, then dashing around to initiate powerful melee combos or cast a huge variety of skills unlockable through the game's upgrade tree, with branching paths and abilities unique to every element. I feel like Radical Fish Games' Twitter bio is a more apt description of the experience than I could ever write myself. It reads, "We are a small group of game developers that somehow managed to create CrossCode." I looked at their website and it lists like 12 people, and the amount of content this game has is unreal. And when I say content, I don't mean meaningless filler, I mean boundless creativity and good side quests. Like, you aren't just fetching items or conveying messages, you're rescuing hostages from flying birds with machine guns, or setting up turrets to play a tower defense, or riding on a giant cannon across the ocean. Before I started the DLC, which is also fantastic, it took me over 50 hours to reach the end credits, and I definitely didn't experience everything. During each and every play session, I was baffled at how well the team was able to construct that vibe you feel in an MMO, where you can gun it through the main quest, but you also have the option to dig around for side content, harvest plants, craft equipment, or spend literal hours solving parkour puzzles to open chests. And when it comes to storytelling, while well-written silent protagonist is a bit of an oxymoron, Leah is my new favorite, hands down. Even with an incredibly limiting pre-programmed word bank, we're talking like hi, Leah, and bye for most of the game, she manages to not only boast a strong personality through facial expressions alone, but also establishes herself as a determined and compassionate character, even as she struggles to remember her past and establish a connection with those around her. Alongside Leah being the star of the show, there is a fun, gripping sci-fi storyline with a strong emotional core rooted in self-expression and friendship, two of the key elements that make MMOs special. And when you toss that into a game already bursting at the seams with crafty puzzles and fantastic combat, I get why everyone's been telling me to play CrossCode. I also just wrote the word yes under my notes for this game's music because, like, as is fitting for the role of an MMO, there is something deeply human about CrossCode. Not just in the Herculean effort of its development team, or in its strong theme of human connection, but in every detail of its world. CrossCode never forgets its inspirations, and it understands that the massively multiplayer part is what gives these games life. So even though you're the only one actually playing CrossCode, it never really feels that way. There's an invisible feeling that shifts based on whether or not you're questing alone or with friends. A slight sadness when your party members log out, or a smile when you get a call from them while you're racing through a dungeon. Everywhere you go, there are players jumping, exploring, chatting, or just taking in the sights together, and the result is something really special. Ah yes, Balatro, the indie darling that took the roguelike world by storm by looking at regular poker and saying, this doesn't adequately obliterate the pleasure centers of our monkey brains. It needs more. For the uninitiated, Balatro is a poker-inspired roguelike. Sounds a bit strange at first, but I promise you it is absolutely phenomenal. In each round, you're put up against a blind that requires you to earn a certain number of points by playing a hand of up to 5 cards. Cards are worth a certain amount of chips based on their rank, and fishing for stronger hands like flushes will give you more chips and multipliers right off the bat. However, you won't make it further than the first blind or two without stacking your deck. And I don't just mean counting cards, which is a built-in feature. The driving forces behind Balatro are jokers. There's a pool of 150 of them that will randomly appear in booster packs and shops, and they each have a unique ability to alter your run in any way imaginable, from added multipliers for certain hands and cards, to bonus interest on round wins, or a credit card to go into debt in the shop. You can even get jokers that copy other jokers to form insanely powerful combos. In addition to jokers, there are tons of secondary modifiers. Planets to level up the value of specific hands, spectral packs to drastically gamble with your deck, and tarot cards to do all sorts of shit. In Balatro, it is very possible and encouraged to manipulate your deck to an insane degree, turning cards into gold or glass, rearranging suits so that almost every card is a heart, or duplicating enough of the same card to start playing secret hands like 5 of a kind. But while the average human may think that tarot cards, spectral cards, planets, modifiers, skip tags, and 150 jokers are enough, Balatro wasn't made by the average human. You see, there simply needed to be 7 additional difficulties with unique modifiers, 15 playable decks, and 20 challenge runs with completely customized rule sets and starting loadouts. The challenges are one of the areas I think the game shines brightest, because they help break up the formula of regular runs and force you to think outside the box with weird strategies you may have otherwise never tried. This is genuinely some masterclass roguelike design. The way each run can develop completely independent of the last, where a build with a single card can be just as powerful as a build where you play a royal flush, where a boss might completely fuck over your entire strategy or force you to rearrange the order of your jokers on the fly. The creativity and variety is unreal, and I can only do it so much justice by listing off numbers and showing cool combos. You simply have to see the heart of the cards to believe it. Local Thunk set out to make an emergent roguelike, and he fucking delivered. There is no story, no lore, no alternate pieces of the puzzle serving as secondary factors to encourage another run. It is just pure gaming essence distilled into one of the most addicting titles I've played in years. And it's not just the gameplay. The entire aesthetic is perfectly hypnotic. The swirling interdimensional backgrounds, the slot machine-esque sound design and visuals that reach every dopamine receptor in your fragile mind as you cross your fingers and excitedly watch the numbers add and multiply, the single dynamic music track that ebbs and flows with gameplay and never gets old after tens of hours. This is that Percy Jackson casino that fast forwards time while you're inside type shit. I played it for 10 hours the first 2 days after I bought it. I almost missed a sponsor deadline. I was struggling to fall asleep at night because I couldn't stop thinking about random poker hands. I spent an evening making an alternate version of the main theme with some friends because it's that good. When they put this game on phones, it's over. You might never hear from me again. I'm currently over 2 months clean from Balatro, but writing this segment and listening to the soundtrack has me thinking that this whole productivity thing is overrated. Just one more run couldn't hurt, right? Penny's Big Breakaway is an intoxicatingly colorful 3D platformer by Evening Star, a new indie studio best known for their work on Sonic Mania. Well, they didn't make Sonic Mania, it's more like several members from the Mania team are now a part of Evening Star, but it's a bit harder to put that into a concise sentence. Anyway, Penny's Big Breakaway is really good. There's just an asterisk at the end of that sentence, which I'm realizing you can't see unless I show you the script. If you're a little timeline peeper, you may have noticed that this is one of the longest sections in the video, and that's because I have quite a few thoughts on this game. But before I get to any of them, let me first say this. If you like 3D platformers, you should absolutely try Penny's Big Breakaway. The movement, the visuals, the atmosphere, the music, my fucking god, the music, dude. Each world is injected with an infectious energy as you catapult through bubbly pink waterworks, icy oceans with boomboxes and wheels of rolling penguins, even a floating library at the edge of space. Every moment spent taking in the atmosphere of this game reveals nothing but passion for the craft. Also, I simply cannot overstate how good the soundtrack is. They hit it out of the fucking stratosphere with this one. One of the reasons this game gets me so excited is because it's been a huge inspiration for my personal creativity. I often struggle to pursue other hobbies due to the time I spend making videos, but when I started hearing tracks from Penny, they just captured that video game essence I love so much that I knew I wanted to start dabbling in music production again. On a whim, I decided to reach out to Sean Bialo about the boss theme he shared, and he's been nice enough to answer my seemingly endless stream of questions I've had about composition, theory, and synths. So, thanks, Sean, if you're watching this. Straight up, Land Ho Diablo is the reason I got back into learning music last year. I mean, can anyone blame me? Listen to this! As you might have already noticed from looking at some gameplay, Penny's movement is the most unique part of the experience. This is not your usual 3D platformer where you run and jump, and it's clear some players did not vibe with that. Hell, if I had only played a few levels, I also would have been upset about how slowly she accelerates when running. But if you make it past the unorthodox learning curve, you realize that feet are nothing compared to the almighty power of a yo-yo. Unless you're picking up a secret collectible in a back room, there's little need to be on foot. The best way to get moving is to throw the yo-yo in front of you, pull yourself into a dash, then either hop on top of it to roll like a big wheel or swing around in midair. This moveset might sound simplistic, but the amount of precision it demands if you want to reach the highest speeds and do the sickest skips is insane, because you can drastically change the speed at which you'll roll on the yo-yo or come flying out of the swing based on how fast you're falling combined with the exact moment of release. The game's worlds are then cleverly designed to facilitate this unique movement. Wide open spaces filled with winding racetracks, obstacles and jumps that can be avoided with enough speed and finesse, and all sorts of distant platforms that are just begging to be used for wild speedrun skips. Each level also contains hidden collectibles, side objectives, and a nice variety of slingshots, zip lines, and wacky power-ups for the yo-yo. It's just a wonderful time. For the most part. Alright, so the asterisk in the room. What's the holdup? How did this game go from highly anticipated after multiple Nintendo Directs to receiving very little attention on release? Well, there's a few reasons. Making a 3D platformer of this scale as an indie team is already quite the endeavor, and there are a few places where things get a bit awkward. I hate to compare Evening Star's debut title to Nintendo, but since there isn't exactly a wealth of outstanding 3D platformers, having a game fall a bit short in this genre definitely contributed to the underwhelming reception. Also, bugs were a significant issue on launch, and while I believe they've been mostly fixed in patches since I played the game, not being able to have full trust in the physics of a 3D platformer definitely muddied the experience for some players, and I ran into awkward collision and slippery physics in my own playthrough. Alright, on to the main issues. While the first one isn't a problem in and of itself, Penny's Big Breakaway has an entirely fixed camera, with the right stick programmed to throw the yo-yo in any direction. While it doesn't take too long to get used to, this camera does make depth perception and tight platforming segments tricky when you have to angle a series of diagonal dashes or actively change directions while moving straight to compensate for a panning camera. This can also make speedrunning quite frustrating because from the very first level, there are multiple segments where you need to actively fight against a mandatory camera move and make a completely blind off-screen jump. It took me over an hour to learn this route, and the overall skill ceiling just feels a bit too rich for my taste. Also, while it's charming the first couple times, it gets really grating to perform a QTE dance sequence at the end of every single level. This next one is purely personal experience, but I like to play games blind, and I was unable to figure out how to hold a combo for an entire level. If you just want to enjoy the game casually, you don't even need to bother with this, but I couldn't find an intuitive way to interact with level mechanics like levers, torches, and pickups without landing on the ground and dropping combo, especially with how awkward hitboxes can feel. To further this point, the combo system itself just doesn't feel worth engaging with. Instead of a game like Pizza Tower, where a high combo requires interacting with various items and enemies throughout the level, Penny's is more of a trick system, but it's really tight. If you want to combo through a level, you have to never let your feet touch the ground outside of a spin and move around more awkwardly than you might be used to. Both the timer and combo meter being constantly displayed on screen even while playing casually and searching for collectibles gives the experience a lack of cohesion, unsure of whether it wants to be a collectathon, a speed game, or something in between. These elements then give off the subtle feeling that you're doing things wrong, or that you should be going faster. Sometimes Penny feels like it wants to be a speed game, but I wish there were more things to incentivize that, a la Pizza Tower or Neon White. And finally, boss fights are just not great. Many bosses have objects you have to hit with the yo-yo, and when paired with lackluster lock-on and hitboxes, doing things like smashing pillars in the judge fight or figuring out the magnet range for the robot didn't feel nearly as seamless as they should have. To close this one out, I know that spending a large chunk of time being negative may make Penny seem lackluster through the lens of a recommendation, but every game is so different that game good often isn't the only idea I want to discuss. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the time I spend analyzing my hangups often far outweighs their impact on the overall experience. When a game makes it into one of these compilations, it means I truly believe it's worth your time, and I always want my critiques to come from a place of care. At the end of the day, Penny's Big Breakaway still really gets it. When you get in the zone and launch yourself across a level with goofy yo-yo tricks, backed by one of the most infectiously playful soundtracks in recent memory, it really does feel like you're playing some cult classic platformer. Good 3D platformers are rare, even rarer in the indie space, and if this is the level Evening Star can reach with their debut title, then I'm very excited to see what they cook up next. Back in 2021, I made a video about Going Under, a delightfully satirical roguelike about exploring the dungeons of failed tech startups. Despite releasing to positive reviews, the game ended up, well, I'm not gonna say the pun, but You can probably figure it out. It earned the underrated moniker from so many reviewers, myself included, that it became something of a joke within the community. The team at Aggro Crab then spent the next few years carefully crafting their next title, a fresh, colorful spin on the Souls-like genre starring a little crab in a trash-filled ocean. To no one's surprise, or at least not to me because I've been rooting for these guys from day one, it was a smash hit. Slept on no more! They put caffeine in this one! In another Crab's Treasure, you play as Krill, a hermit crab trying to retrieve their shell while fighting corrupted sea creatures and platforming across sand castles, coral reefs, and sludge factories. While the core gameplay is fun in its own right, it's the concept and aesthetic that truly helps Another Crab's Treasure set itself apart in the Souls-like genre. You're not just dueling bosses in a dark fantasy world. You're playing a fishing minigame to reel in a teleporting shrimp or grappling on top of a towering behemoth of caged crabs while wearing a toy truck for a shell and jamming a tinier toy truck onto the end of your fork to turn it into a makeshift hammer. The entire experience just oozes creativity. As you journey through the game's locales and their connected overworld, the Sands Between, you'll discover a painstakingly crafted world filled with tons of bosses, secrets, and Easter eggs that make even the smallest environmental details feel exciting. The sheer amount and variety of trash that pollutes the ocean establishes a stark, depressing reality amidst an otherwise colorful landscape, but its utilization within the world is very clever and charming, from crabs using noodles as hair to lower class houses being built out of delivery boxes with a scannable QR code.
I'm scanning the QR code.
Oh shit. Yeah, tell me where it goes. Probably their website.
It goes to YouTube. It sent me to the UK. It's God damn it. That's fucked up, dude. I can't believe they coconut mauled me.
Now, when it comes to combat, I'm no Souls-like expert. My credentials are beating Elden Ring and beating an insanely difficult Elden Ring co-op mod for an Iron Pineapple video. But I feel like this game just nails it. In addition to traditional parries and dodge rolls, the core mechanic of Another Crab's Treasure centers around picking up various pieces of trash to use as temporary shells, and it's so genius. It's the perfect blend of strategy, goofy skills, and frenzied panic, inspired by the weapon break systems in Breath of the Wild and Going Under. Instead of being able to hoard the best shells, you just have to use them. Grab one for a skill, pop a couple parries, shatter it by blocking one too many hits, and then scurry around the battlefield like a hermit crab in need of a shell to quickly find a new one before you get clobbered. The shells being disposable comes full circle to sell that polluted ocean vibe, since most of them are just trash. Soda cans, tennis balls, light bulbs, even a copy of a super underrated game. You can also roll in certain shells like a ball and gain speed down inclines, and I mean, come on, that's too fun. To be honest, other than the camera having a little too much fun sometimes, my only critiques are more of a wish list of balance changes made specifically for me. I found my shells breaking way less often in the late game than I'd have liked, especially as I unlocked abilities that let them regenerate their health or respawn after they broke, which led to me losing out on that frantic feeling that carries the early hours of combat. I also just wish the game was harder in general, but that's more of a byproduct of being a shut-in and figuring out that Wave Breaker into uninterruptible Giga Fucker Punch does quite a bit of damage. But in case you're new to this type of combat, Aggro Crab has you covered with a wide range of assist options that make Another Crab's Treasure one of the most accessible and customizable Souls-likes out there. They also put a gun in the game. This was Miyazaki's vision. Every time I play a game like Another Crab's Treasure, I am re-surprised by how much a small team can accomplish. I'm obviously biased with how much I loved Going Under, but just because a studio makes a good game doesn't mean they'll definitely succeed in a completely new genre. But if anything, Another Crab's Treasure proves that Aggro Crab gets it, because they fucking did it again! They made a colorful 3D platformer Souls-like with some of the funniest writing I've ever seen in a video game, while also telling a heartfelt little story about ocean pollution, housing markets, isolation, inequality, crabitalism, you name it. This is the shortest section of the video because there's really not much else to say other than game good. I am so happy to see this endeavor pay off for Aggro Crab. Not like I actually worked on the game, mind you. I say this as more of an estranged relative than anything. Back in 2021, the devs were kind enough to send me a review code, answer some of my questions for a video, and not hate my guts after I got mad at them in my stream because I didn't believe they were actually the developers of the game I was playing. The guilt still stings a little. If anyone at Aggro Crab is watching this, good shit, fellas! What the fuck? When looking at its mechanics and map design alone, Unsighted is an incredibly solid action RPG. It's got all the essentials: cool weapons, high-speed combat, puzzle dungeons, and a bunch of unique movement abilities and alternate paths that turn it into a wildly non-linear experience. But if it was just a solid action RPG, there wouldn't be much else to say. What made Unsighted interesting enough in italic text to earn a spot in this video 3 years after its initial release? What's the mechanic that caused some players to turn away from the experience entirely? Well, it's time. To give you the TLDR, humans built a bunch of automatons that gained consciousness after a strange meteor hit the planet, but this scared the humans, so they dropped a big tower on the meteor to block off its energy, causing every automaton to slowly lose its mind. There's just one tiny little problem. There aren't many humans left, which means just about every character in the game is an automaton. The shopkeepers, the blacksmiths, side quest holders, your companion fairy, even you yourself can become Unsighted. Every enemy you fight is just someone else that already ran out of time. It is a bold design decision that you are constantly reminded of. In every interaction, the speaker's remaining time is displayed beneath their name, and you're given a pop-up when anyone you've met reaches 24 hours remaining. The only way to extend an automaton's life is by giving them meteor dust, a collectible item you can find scattered across the map. This creates an almost paradoxically positive spin on exploration. At first, you might think that a time limit would make you want to rush for the final boss, but in my experience, it was the exact opposite. I explored far more than I usually do in this type of game because it rewarded me with the very substance I needed to keep people alive, as well as materials that would make me stronger and faster. Meteor dust is also a requirement to craft additional health syringes, which adds an interesting extra use to make it feel even scarcer. There's a wonderful flow state to the entire game thanks to its incredibly open and interconnected map, such that you might get lost in a dungeon and then stumble upon a path back into an area you've already been to, so you use the new ability you recently found to re-explore for a while before seeing a pop-up like, oh fuck, grandma's about to die, better go give her her meds, so you head back to town, do some shit, go back into the dungeon, rinse and repeat until you've beaten the entire game in 3 days. Oops. In terms of a general gameplay overview, I really don't have much else to say other than, you should really play Unsighted. It's a lovely game that manages to incorporate a truly unique mechanic without over-relying on its novelty, and I think that's super important. There is a very smart Metroidvania meets 2D Zelda game here that makes for a great experience even without the time limits, so you should definitely give it a try if any of this sounded interesting. Also, one of the core unlockable movement options is a giant spinning top that can grind on rails and skip across water, and I feel like if my friends had told me about that alongside the timer mechanic, it may not have taken me 3 years to play this gem. Since its release in late 2023, Void Stranger has been one of the indies most frequently recommended to me, even though no one wanted to tell me anything about it. Despite being the game I spent the most time playing on this list, clocking in at a final time of 46 hours, which doesn't include the time I spent swirling puzzles around in my brain for a few weeks, it's the game I can say the least about. Why? Well, you know Outer Wilds, Tunic, games built around layers of discovery that fundamentally redefine how you interact with the world as you explore it multiple times? Void Stranger is one of those trust me and go in blind type games, but with a small caveat. You gotta really like block puzzles. Developed by System Erasure, the two-man studio behind Zero Ranger, a game that I still gotta play, Void Stranger is a monochromatic pixel art Sokoban game, a grid-based puzzler about rearranging floor tiles and strategically pushing boulders while timing movements and avoiding enemies. But it's not just any Sokoban game. From the moment you enter the Void and acquire a strange scepter, the atmosphere, music, and literal text on screen exclaim that something is wrong. As you descend deeper into the labyrinth, you'll begin to discover an intricate tapestry of secrets hidden within its twisting walls. No game is for everyone, but this statement is especially the case for Void Stranger. It's one of my strongest recommendations on this list, but to the smallest number of people. If you don't like Sokoban-style puzzle solving, I wouldn't bother with this one. The story has some incredibly tender and chilling moments, and the soundtrack absolutely jams, but you have to solve a fuck ton of puzzles, many of them more than once. Ignoring my time spent theory crafting outside of the game itself, I'd say like 70 to 80% of the experience was spent dealing with Sokoban puzzles. You'll eventually find new ways to fit the square block into the circle hole, but your ass is not getting out of picking up the blocks. Now, because I want to spoil as little as possible about Void Stranger, I'm gonna zoom out a little and talk about the feelings that made it so impactful. From Dragon's Plague in Dragon's Dogma 2 to hey, would you look at that, the time limits in Unsighted, the concept of frictional game design is always a hot topic. There's a thinly veiled idea concerning good or bad design that often has its roots in minimizing frustration. But the more a game isn't designed around the player being the center of the universe, the more it does have elements that lead to intense feelings of frustration. That's where you can find the real shit. As the developer of Spelunky mentioned in a GDC talk, it leads to one of the most interesting ideas in gaming, the feeling that a world can exist without you. And that's exactly what makes Void Stranger so compelling. This is a game that will not hand you its secrets. It has no problem throwing an hour of your time out the window or stopping you dead in your tracks if you don't pay sufficient attention to your surroundings at all times. Some reviews call it unforgiving or unfair, but I see it as simply needing to meet Void Stranger where it's at, with where it's at being a couple miles above most other video games. Every failure is a lesson, and the lack of an undo button is a brutal yet poignant piece of ludonarrative design. You will need to count moves, pre-solve puzzles in your head, compile screenshots, and draw scribbles and theories all over a notebook until the game buries itself so deeply in your mind that you end up solving a puzzle by imagining the room layout 2 nights later. It's an archaeological dig, unearthing the secrets, mysteries, and languages of a strange dimension where nothing feels outside the realm of possibility. And cheating is all but encouraged so long as you don't fear the consequences of getting caught. Hell, maybe you'll even need to collaborate with a friend or two like I did, spending hours on end mulling over cryptic discoveries and cutscenes. The concept of retreading through hundreds of puzzles again and again may sound daunting, but the way every mechanic is repeatedly flipped on its head or split clean in half helps keep things interesting. Smoothing out all the rough edges would mean turning the game into something it's not, and it nails what it aims to do so well that it is easily one of the coolest indie games I've ever played. It is deeply inspiring, and I hope that I can one day contribute to a project that delivers even a fraction of the impact Void Stranger has had on those who've seen it through to the end. Thank you to everyone who passionately recommended this game to me over the past few months. Seeing such an outpouring of support is honestly what got me to bite the bullet and dive in. And to everyone at System Erasure, I can hear you. Have you ever wanted to play an MMO without having to play an MMO? Experience the equivalent of fourth dimensional musical chairs and memorize a bunch of wacky mechanics with your friends without having to skip cutscenes and grind gear for hundreds of hours? The joke is that there's an indie game that is like that. Rabbit and Steel fills such a perfect niche and scratches such a perfect itch that I'm honestly surprised it's the first of its kind. A multiplayer bullet hell roguelike strongly inspired by Final Fantasy XIV raids. Before each run, you'll choose from one of 10 RPG classes like Dancer, Assassin, and Druid, each with unique fighting and positioning styles that add a nice bit of depth to planning runs as a team. You'll then progress through several areas, fighting bosses while stopping at chests and shops along the way to pick up items and enhance your abilities. But make no mistake, getting past said bosses is not a walk in the park. Rabbit and Steel is a very difficult game that changes based on how many people you're playing with. In solo runs, enemy attacks lean harder into bullet hell design, while each added player in multiplayer means a stronger emphasis on callouts, communication, and chaos.
I don't understand.
I'm scared.
While casting your abilities, you'll need to pay attention to gusts of wind, stack circles, spread markers, rotating lasers, color indicators. You gotta be able to look at whatever this is, and in the span of a couple seconds, be like, okay, so we gotta move to the four corners of the screen based on our teleport arrows, but not too far so that we still overlap our destinations for the circle stacks, and convey that to your three friends flailing on opposite sides of the battlefield like fish out of water. I have over 50 hours logged, and I genuinely do not know if I will ever have the time or sanity to clear lunar mode once. I've spent most of my playtime on hard difficulty, but normal mode does a really solid job at introducing core mechanics while still maintaining a solid challenge, and there is a mode called Cute. I just never played it. The aspect of Rabbit and Steel I want to praise just as much as the battle design is the actual roguelike implementation. Despite the MMO-esque bosses having enough depth to carry an experience on their own, the ability upgrades and items don't feel like an afterthought. This game feels like a roguelike. You can have weaker runs where you won't be able to deal enough damage to kill a boss before it enrages, or you can stumble into a god build where you're firing out nuclear punches or gaining every buff in the game at the same time. Getting to select your loot from a small pool instead of it being completely random gives a valuable sense of control and creativity, as you'll need to carefully consider not just your build, but whether or not the item you're eyeing might be a better fit for one of your teammates. Rather than being boring stat increases, many items in Rabbit and Steel are designed to modify your existing abilities or trigger bonus effects after various actions. They are also not one size fits all. You can deliberately cut your DPS in half or reduce your movement speed way too heavily if you aren't careful. The feature that enhances the roguelikeness even further is the ability upgrade system. At the beginning of each major area, you can spend your gold on upgrades for each of your 4 abilities. There are 5 possible gems for each ability, with drastic effects like boosting damage at the cost of increased cooldowns, or removing damage entirely to create a fast casting buff for your other moves. You can take a risk and remove utility from your dodge in exchange for damage, damage or convert a constant flurry of punches into a Giga Blast that takes 8 seconds to charge. Only having 4 abilities may seem way simpler than a traditional MMO with massive hotbars and complicated macros, but this system keeps things surprisingly fresh by changing and evolving your skill rotations over the course of each run. The one small critique I have when it comes to Rabbit and Steel is attack visibility. This is a game that demands precise input and quick thinking, but it's also trying to display concepts and mechanics from 3D games in a 2D space with a simple art style. I've experimented with several of the game's color schemes and display options, but when 3 stack circles overlap with teleport markers, spread indicators, and text above every player's head, it can feel impossible to naturally parse what's going on. Since attacks can't be displayed up in the air or above a player's head, areas you need to avoid are represented by overlapping half-transparent lines and circles of the same color. When it comes to Lunar specifically, it's very much meant to be understood and memorized over many attempts, and is also not designed for the average player, but my eyes can still get lost in the mess even when I know what I'm supposed to be looking for. Realistically though, there's no simple fix here. There might not even be a fix at all, but for a solo dev project, it's mind-boggling how well choreographed most fights are in both mechanics and visual design. This is all a much more elaborate and nuanced way of saying, what the fuck were they cooking in Red Dark House, dude? Why'd they make it so hard?
We did it, hooray. And now maybe we can snowball. Maybe. Oh, fuck.
Oh, no.
As challenging as Rabbit and Steel can get, I'd highly recommend it to any roguelike or multiplayer enthusiast. Or both. It's rare to find such a cooperative and replayable experience nowadays, and I've had an absolute blast playing it with friends over the last few weeks. While some of my party members have been MMO junkies, I've also managed to get a lot of people who have never played Final Fantasy hooked on it, which shows that you don't need to be a complete degenerate to hop in and have a great time. Music also slaps. If I had all the time in the world, I'd gush about every game soundtrack until the end of time, but the short version is that sometimes you'll be locked in with a sick-ass battle theme, and other times you'll be chilling in the shop with a bossa nova vocal song that's like... But then you start a fight and... I know I call these videos indie games you need to try, but do demos count? If you aren't familiar with The Big Catch, it's an upcoming 3D platformer that takes strong inspiration from old-school games of the Dreamcast and PS2 eras, complete with visual filters to simulate a retro look and composite TV displays. It also adds fishing and turns the fishing pole into a core movement mechanic. So needless to say, I backed it on Kickstarter as soon as I saw the reveal trailer, and the backer preview turned public demo was more than impressive enough to earn a recommendation. Since I'd like to save discussing this game's overall aesthetic for a full review, I thought it'd be interesting to go more in-depth on the platforming since it's a majority of what's on display. I mean, considering there's only one region, a few songs, and a single NPC, the Tacklebox isn't really a good representation of the full game's structure. What I will say at this point in time is that I am in love with every single piece of this game's design. The UI animations are exploding with personality, the sound design is snappy and satisfying, and the art direction is fucking magnificent. The colors, the textures, the hexagonal lens flares streaking across the sky as you stare at the sun. It's impossible for me not to have a stupid grin on my face every time I grab a little sandworm and ride through the desert with a jam blasting in the background. Anyway, let's talk about the gameplay. First off, the Tacklebox is unbelievably big for being a free demo. Like, there's enough variety, challenge, and collectible content that I would have been satisfied paying full price for this thing. I spent over 6 hours exploring, and I'm still missing over 100 of the 688 coins hidden across the desert. Once you leave the starting room, you're instructed to go find fish and coins, and that's about it. You can grab onto a sand shredder and tackle an array of Bowser's Fury style platforming challenges in any order you please, but there isn't any real framing or story. Despite this lack of structure, the exploration loop feels great on its own, and the amount of varied mechanics on display is incredibly exciting. To give you a brief rundown of the game's movement, the big catch is a momentum-based platformer built around running and jumping on walls while using your fishing pole to interact with various objects like grapples and slingshots. Due to the fact that most moves don't feel automatic, it's a bit more demanding than your average platformer. For example, the wall run takes into account both the speed and angle at which you approach it, so if you're plummeting towards the ground, you can't just cancel out gravity. This does lead to a slightly trickier initial learning curve, but once you internalize its design, holy fuck does it feel good. The way you can conserve momentum through downward inclines, grind rails, and bee-hopping contributes to a flow state so engaging that the Tacklebox didn't need a story or larger objective to keep me hooked. I basically spent 6 hours in a video game playground and the time flew by. As a self-proclaimed I wish video games were harder type guy, I'm also a huge fan of the difficulty on display here. This is a fairly demanding game that requires you to internalize and chain together all of its mechanics, which is refreshing considering a majority of 3D platformers fail to challenge me outside of post-game levels or speedrun attempts. Many segments have a slim margin of error that can make the game feel less approachable and more punishing than usual, but it is incredibly rewarding when paired with a bit of patience. Comparing it to rage games like Getting Over It feels rather disingenuous, but I will admit that a few sections, like this one in the Chapel Castle where you gotta do like 5 spin jump, wall run, wall jump, pole grabs in a row, can get a bit frustrating, and the walk of shame back to the start of a platforming segment can get a bit tedious when you need to perform it multiple times. Overall though, I feel that the rising tension and excitement behind climbing these massive structures is more than worth the trade-off, but I do think it may end up scaring some players away through its potential tedium. One of the Tacklebox's other strengths is found in its level design, as figuring out how to get from point A to point B can become a challenge in its own right. To find your next move, you may need to survey your surroundings for a moment to find the correct segment of pillars and walls that'll get you to a seemingly impossible to reach ledge, and each eureka moment can feel just as rewarding as actually making it across the gap. Oh, and remember when I said you gotta catch fish? To get them out of the water, you'll need to yank them out with some bait. And once they are out of the water, well, turns out these little dudes are sick as fuck. Since these two-legged freaks can also perform most of your platforming actions, chasing after them turns into a clever game of parkour tag where you gotta surprise them around corners or chain together slide jumps to catch up. It's a hilariously fun mechanic. My only strong piece of feedback after playing the demo is that needing to input a crouch before the slide kick makes an important mechanic tricky to execute, and having to chain together 3 buttons for the slide jump is incredibly awkward. That's about it though, especially since they've patched a couple of my more minor complaints while I was working on this script. Long story short, the Tacklebox fucking rules. The developers at Filet Group have an incredibly strong vision that seeks to evoke the spirit of classic 3D platformers while carving a path that feels fresh and exciting. I hope I don't have to eat my own words here, but if the full game manages to maintain and expand upon the strong core shown in this demo, I can easily see the big catch becoming an all-timer. It's that good. Now I just have to wait for the full release. Hey, if the devs are watching, can I get like a review code? Like a year early? Thanks. Every time I make one of these indie videos, I usually pull some sort of saving the best for last maneuver. Whether it's the sheer scale of CrossCode, the emotional storytelling of Pyre, or the mysteries of Tunic, I try to save the most memorable experience for the end. For my most recent video, the choice was incredibly tough. It could have been Void Stranger, hell, maybe I'd say it was a tie, but I chose this as the last game for some reason. In the first compilation I ever made, my final game was Sayonara Wild Hearts by Sumogo. And as fate would have it, for my most recent compilation, it was Lorelei and the Laser Eyes by Sumogo. Immediately after its announcement in 2022, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes became one of my most anticipated indie games, despite having no idea what the actual game was about. Sumogo is a studio that somehow manages to redefine themselves with every release and still drop banger after banger, and after recently finishing Lorelei, they fucking did it again! It's nothing short of a masterpiece, a game so painstakingly dedicated to its vision that not a single number, not a single word, not a single pixel is taken for granted. I feel I can only scratch the surface of interpreting its layers of interactive commentary on connecting art and audience, but for a puzzle game that left me feeling more obsessed after each hour of skimming through astrological signs and Roman numerals, maybe my lack of words is fitting. Two of its main inspirations, the original Resident Evil games and an avant-garde French film from 1961, are both outside my wheelhouse in terms of analysis, but maybe the feeling of getting chased through a haunted manor by a floating suit with a maze for a head illustrates what it's like to play this game better than I ever could. All the store description page will tell you is that Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a game about a woman invited to a hotel by an eccentric man to participate in a strange art project. As unsure as the player is about where or when they are, the Steam page is too. Imagine an old Baroque manor, perhaps a hotel or museum somewhere in Central Europe.
I have been asked to approach you about a project related to events in 1847, 1963, 2014, and one happening in the very near future.
The game itself is a neo-noir escape room of sorts, as you're tasked with exploring a strange manor in search of clues about the past, present, and future of those involved with the project. The puzzles themselves are layered in a way only a video game can be, as Lorelei uses its interactive medium to the fullest extent. It is art about interacting with art, as creator and consumer. You interface with text, drawings, photos, movies, music, even games inside a larger game, and they all help tell a story about what it means to create art and release it into the world. Hidden within the game's red mirrors are constant reflections. It feels deeply technical and magical, concrete and surreal. Every puzzle and solution contributes to the story, and the story itself is like a massive non-linear puzzle to piece together in your mind. But for as much abstract imagery as I can paint about this game, the puzzle design is very logical. There is always one correct solution, one truth. Puzzles start out simple enough with years, dates, Roman numerals, and a bit of math, but slowly evolve into bizarre riddles and optical illusions across eras of time in reality and fiction. They aren't so much about finding the solution as they are about interpreting the means to input it, which goes along with the whole interfacing with art thing. Also, as a neat little piece of game design, most solutions are shuffled around so that you can't directly rip answers from a guide. If a door wants you to put a code in, the number will likely be randomized, which means even if you do look up the answers, you still have to engage with every single piece of the game to beat it. But also, like, don't follow a guide. Lorelei's difficulty is so well designed that the best way to experience it is by going in as blind as possible. Bring nothing but your big ol' beautiful brain. And a notebook. Maybe two. I had the one they sent me to keep track of Roman numerals and star signs, and my other one that looks like I was deciphering a government conspiracy and planning a murder at the same time. By the way, don't spoil yourself by actually looking at my notes. You know what, even if you did look, what the fuck are you gonna get from this? Like, that's just a drawing of a house. At this point, I feel as if I may have already spoiled too much, so I'll close with this. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a tour de force. It's a game by creatives at the top of their game, armed with the collective expertise and knowledge of nearly 15 years in game development. I'd call it a magnum opus, but that would assume Simogo won't make anything better, and having followed this studio since 2010, as a kid putting Cosmos Spin on my iPod Touch, I truly think the sky's the limit for them. With Simogo, you never really know what's next. An adorable endless runner, a goofy rhythm game, a puzzle game where you gotta rotate your phone and shit, a pop album video game. Then after the pop album, they went, okay, colors are hard, let's do black and white, and casually cooked up one of the best puzzle games I've ever played. I don't really know if I have anything else poetic to say here. I just love indie games, man. There are a few things I can say to introduce this final game as succinctly as, it was so good that it became the secret 9th game in a video called 8 Indie Games You Need to Try. 1000 Times Resist is one of the best narratives I've ever experienced in a video game. I was gonna say you should get a jump on it before all of your favorite video essayists start talking about it, but Jacob Geller beat me to the punch. This is an incredibly emotional experience from a small, passionate team with an unwavering vision. It's part gripping sci-fi adventure, part fierce political commentary, and part generational trauma, motherhood, Hong Kong protests, and so many other themes that I would struggle to fit them all in this recommendation. Considering one of the game's main ideas concerns what we take with us and what we leave behind, maybe that's fitting.
Sorry, you won't fit in my backpack.
In 1000 Times Resist, you play as Watcher, one of many cloned sisters carrying out their duty in service of an immortal teenager who calls herself the All-Mother. To perform your function, you commune with All-Mother and relive scrambled memories of her childhood, and telling you any more would take away from the absolute genius of this game's storytelling. 1000 Times Resist threw me for a loop over and over again. It'd drop a scene so vivid and striking it could be a painting in a museum, and then I'd walk around it and through it and see it from different angles, viewpoints, and control schemes. Then I'd get sucker punched with a line of dialogue harrowing enough to make my stomach turn. And then, after catching my breath, I'd take a right hook to the jaw from a plot twist I could have never seen coming. Also, every single line of dialogue, which there is a lot of, is voice acted, which is just insanely impressive and contributes so heavily to the overall experience. Sure, it's not a game that communicates a story through intense decision-making or challenging gameplay, but it's a story that can only exist as a game. 1000 Times Resist being described as a visual novel walking simulator undercuts the impact of being able to observe and move within the game's physical spaces, as I was honestly underprepared for the sheer emotion that came from simply existing within the different areas the game presents. Being able to move within hundreds of scenes and observe the intertwining relationships across time and space as you jump between memories is so immersive that every time I try to consider 1000 Times Resist existing as a book or a movie or a show, it just doesn't work. The way it incorporates the surreal dreaminess of memories into parallel non-linear narratives through inhabited perspectives, camera angles, senses of scale, even just objects shifting and disappearing as you turn around, it's this feeling that makes it a video game. It's also an extremely good video game with a so beautiful I dragged my ass back to the piano soundtrack, so I hope it continues to receive the attention it deserves. Alright, that was 27 indie games. That's a lot of games. Thank you so much for watching this massive compilation all the way to the end, and apologies for decimating both your wallet and spare time. Let me know if you have any recommendations, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with 28 indie games you need to try or else. No, seriously, I'm definitely not crossing my fingers behind my back or anything.